Today, we're sitting down with leaders from Dow AgriSciences as well as expert cattlemen to discuss forage management and why it's so important to cattlemen across the country. And joining me in the studio today are Dave Owens, Portfolio Marketing Leader with Dow AgriSciences. Pat Birch is also with Dow AgriSciences and is a field scientist for the organization. Jeff Smink, owner of Center of the Nation Cattle Company in Newell, South Dakota. And Glenn Benjamin, rancher from Simla, Colorado, in addition to being president of the Colorado Livestock Association. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk first of all about what forage management is. And Dave, I want to start with you. Can you just define forage management in your terms?
Sure, absolutely. When I think of it, it follows three pretty simple aspects. The first one is to know as much as you possibly can about your own forage enterprise. And this is probably the hardest thing for most cattlemen to grasp. I mean, they love cattlemen, they love cattle. They know everything there is to know about their particular breed, but a lot of times how to manage that forage is a little bit lacking. And there are literally hundreds of different forage enterprises across the U.S. If you think about down south, you've got folks that are raising Bermuda grass. If you move a little bit west and a little north, you get into fescue areas. And then finally, you get out into the Great Plains and you're into native grass species. You really need to know all the nuances of how that forage responds in order to manage it effectively. The second thing to do is really to set goals for yourself and follow up on them. If you think about that Bermuda grass manager down in the southeast, he might want to raise his cows but also provide some high-quality hay for like a neighboring horse farm. If they're doing that, then weed control is going to be critical. You don't want horse nettle making big old black splotches in the middle of your fine coastal Bermuda grass hay. As you move into fescue, you may want to plant some warm season grasses to kind of cover what we call the summer slump in the fescue belt. And then finally, if you get into the native range, you really need to understand what species you have and say, okay, do I want to improve my range condition over a period of time? And if so, what do I need to do from a management perspective to make that happen? And finally, the follow-up is really critical. And I tell folks to be aggressive in monitoring how their forage is responding to the system, grazing system that they have. If you take a look at our good friends down in Texas and Oklahoma last year, their pastures or their rangeland looked an awful lot like my hairline. Okay? They had a little bit of forage around some of the creeks and some of the ponds, some of the wetter areas, but up in the upland areas, absolutely nothing going on. So if their goal was to improve range condition, this drought has really set them back. And they really need to closely monitor how much weed and increased brush pressure they're getting this particular year, and then take action on that to keep themselves moving forward. So those three simple premises are really what I consider when I think about forage management.
The big question in your analogy is, will some spring showers bring back the hairline? That's my question.
Probably not the hairline, but Texas is greening up fairly well, so life is getting better down there.
Jeff, I want to turn to you. What do you see as some of the benefits of good forage management for cattlemen like yourself?
Well, we look at it as an insurance policy. The rest rotation system that we set up years ago was really designed to optimize our grass production. And I think in my area, where it's predominantly western wheatgrass, that the most important part of the grassland ecosystem is not necessarily what you see, but what you don't see. It's the root systems underground. And that resting a pasture for an entire year really allows those root systems to really be healthy and expand, allowing your grasses to be healthier then. And then the other aspect, of course, is the grazing. Our grassland ecosystems evolved under grazing pressures. So to be healthy, they need to be grazed and properly managed. So that's our general philosophy.
Very good. Glenn, you're a cattleman, but you also have a chance to talk to a lot of other cattlemen in your leadership role here in the state of Colorado. What's your perspective?
Well, forage is really the heart of my operation, and it is for many other cattlemen also, because with the increase in grain prices, keeping the cattle out on grass for as long as possible and getting as many pounds as possible is really critical these days. And in my operation, my goal is to graze my cattle year-round. So I stockpile a lot of forage for winter grazing and try to keep those cattle out on the grass without having to feed a lot of extra protein or hay. So with the added pressures of yearling operations expanding, trying to get as much gain on grass as possible, this forage production and the amount of grass that you can grow in your pastures is just critical to keep it at a high level.
And tell me this, Pat, from your perspective, is this what you hear as you travel around and visit with other producers all across the country?
Well, most of my experience is in the mid-Atlantic region of the United States, but in our area, I think there's a greater emphasis now on forage management than there has ever been. I think shrinking land bases are driving that, but as well as the grain prices. But there's more interest now in managing that resource to keep those cattle out there longer on the pasture and gain more from it.